You'd think throwing a backyard barbecue would be the most harmless way to welcome your family to your new home. But in Willow Creek Estates, it was enough to start a war. What began as burgers on the grill and kids laughing in the sprinkler quickly turned into violation notices, clipboard inspections, and an HOA president named Eleanor Thompson, who seemed to think she ruled her own suburban kingdom. And when she blocked an ambulance from reaching my pregnant sister because she wasn't a registered guest, it stopped being ridiculous and became dangerous. That's when my dad, a federal judge, stepped in. What we uncovered was more than just petty fines and power trips. We found fraud, surveillance, blackmail, and a web of corruption stretching across 17 HOA communities statewide. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about control and what happens when ordinary people fight back. This is a true story. And trust me, you're not ready for how deep it goes. If you've ever had a run-in with a power-hungry HOA or just love a good scandal, subscribe to Real HOA Drama right now. You won't believe what some people will do in the name of property values. I dreamed of a backyard barbecue for months. The kind with sizzling burgers, kids screaming through sprinklers, and the comforting smell of charcoal hanging in the air like a promise. After 3 months of unpacking boxes and working 70-hour weeks as a software engineer, I was finally ready to make my new house in Willow Creek Estates feel like a home. And nothing screams home like family. So when my sister Emily pulled into the driveway in her beat-up minivan with her 3 kids in tow, I swear I heard background music swell in my head, maybe some 90s sitcom theme song. The kids poured out like popcorn from a bag, shrieking with joy, running circles in the backyard like they owned it. I fired up the grill. Dad cracked open a cold one on the porch, and for a brief, perfect moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Until she arrived. "Excuse me," came a voice sharper than a cheese grater on a chalkboard. We all turned. Marching across my lawn in blindingly white sneakers was a woman who looked like she'd just walked off a Stepford Wives movie set. Hair shellacked into a blonde helmet. A floral blouse buttoned all the way to her throat like it was personally offended by skin. And, of course, a clipboard. "I'm Eleanor Thompson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." She said it like she expected applause. I blinked, spatula midair.
Hi.
"I'm Michael Harris. Just having a little family barbecue. Can I help you?" She didn't smile. She pointed at Emily's minivan like it had personally insulted her begonias. "Are these registered guests?" My sister looked at me, confused. "Registered? What are we? At a hotel?" Eleanor's expression didn't budge. According to HOA Bylaw 3.12, all visitors must be submitted to the HOA office at least 72 hours prior to arrival. I laughed. Not a mocking laugh, more of a surely you're kidding kind of laugh. "They're my family. They're here for the weekend." "That's not how it works," she said, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. "This is your first formal warning. 3 violations and you may be fined or subject to further action." Dad stood from the porch. He didn't raise his voice.
He didn't have to.
When you're a federal judge, you learn how to command a room just by existing. "Are you suggesting my grandchildren can't visit their uncle without pre-approval paperwork?" Eleanor's eyes flicked to him. "Rules apply equally to everyone, sir, even judges." Dad gave a polite nod. "Fascinating. I'd love to see the legal precedent behind denying visitation rights on private property based on HOA bylaws." For a moment, just a flicker, her mask cracked. Then she pasted on a tight smile and said, "I'll overlook this one time." She turned and marched back the way she came, clipboard held like a sword. Emily whispered, "What just happened?" I didn't know, but the burgers didn't taste quite as good after that. That night, after the kids had passed out and the crickets had taken over the soundtrack, Dad and I sat on the patio with beers in hand. "That HOA president," he said, "reminds me of a few cases I've seen. People who mistake authority for power." I chuckled. "She's just uptight." Dad didn't smile. "Read your HOA documents carefully, son. People like her rarely stop at backyard barbecues." I didn't know it yet, but those words would turn out to be the most prophetic thing he ever said to me. The next morning, I opened my front door still in pajama pants, coffee in hand, expecting birdsong and maybe the local paper. What I got instead was a bright pink notice taped to my door like a scarlet letter for suburban sin. Notice of HOA violations. It screamed in bold caps. 3 of them, actually. 1. Unauthorized visitors. 2. Improperly parked vehicle. 3. Excessive noise after 8 p.m. Emily's old minivan hadn't even made a sound aside from its usual arthritic groan when it turned corners and the excessive noise. That must have been my nephew blowing into a pool noodle like it was a jazz solo. I stood there, dumbfounded, while the coffee in my hand went cold. That's when I noticed a second pink slip, this one fluttering under my windshield wiper. Eleanor had double-tapped me. The notice came complete with a time-stamped photo of Emily's van, taken at what looked like 7:14 p.m., right in the middle of burger flipping time. The image was grainy, but clear enough to see the baby on board sticker mocking me in the back window. So now I wasn't just a neighbor, I was a documented offender. When I called the HOA office for clarification, the voice on the line was friendly enough until I gave my name. "Oh," the woman said, drawing out the vowel like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Mr. Harris." "Yes. President Thompson has noted your non-compliance." "Non-compliance?" "I didn't realize visiting family and grilling burgers turned you into a suburban anarchist." Later that day, while trying to forget I was now public enemy number 1 in a gated community with lavender bushes and dog waste bag stations every 20 feet, I decided to take a walk. That's when I saw it. A new security camera mounted at the entrance of the subdivision. It hadn't been there the day before. Of that I was sure. It was sleek, modern, and aimed directly at the road. There was no HOA email. No sign. Nothing but a blinking red light that screamed, "Smile. Big Brother's watching." I turned to my neighbor Sam, who was watering his hydrangeas like it was a competitive sport. "Hey, Sam. That camera knew." He froze for a second too long. "Oh, maybe. HOA said it's for community safety." Community safety.
Right.
Like my 3-year-old niece was going to take out a mailbox with a water gun. As I walked back home, I noticed someone watching from across the street, a woman in her early 60s, dressed in a pale green cardigan even though it was 82 degrees. She had a clipboard, but it hung loosely at her side. Her name tag read Linda Blake, HOA board member. Our eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave, but her expression wasn't like the others. No disapproval. No superiority. Just pity. Like she was watching a man walk into a storm barefoot. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, then stopped, looked over her shoulder toward Eleanor's house, and walked inside without a word. And just like that, the air around me shifted. Willow Creek no longer felt like a charming, well-kept community. It felt like a place where quiet wars were fought with clipboards, cameras, and pink slips. And I was the guy who had unknowingly stepped onto the battlefield with a plate of hot dogs. I stood there on my porch, violation notice in hand, and said to myself out loud, "What the hell did I move into?" It started with a scream. Not the kind that follows a jump scare in a horror movie. No, this one was raw, primal, and filled with pain. I bolted out of bed and nearly tripped over my dog on the way to the guest room. Inside, my sister Rachel, 8 months pregnant and already waddling like a determined penguin for the past 2 weeks, was hunched over the bed, white-knuckling the mattress. "My water broke," she gasped, sweat already clinging to her forehead. I glanced at the clock, 5:32 a.m.
Great.
Nothing says suburban nightmare like childbirth before sunrise. Tom, her husband, came stumbling in from the hallway, shirt half on, one sock missing. "It's too early," the doctor said next month. "Well, someone didn't inform the baby," Rachel snapped between contractions. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed her bag, helped her down the stairs, and got her into the car faster than a Domino's delivery promise. Tom climbed into the back seat, frantically texting the hospital. We were halfway down the driveway when it happened. A black SUV swung in front of us and slammed on the brakes, blocking the road like it was an action movie. Out stepped, of course, Eleanor Thompson, clipboard in hand, flanked by her minions Martin Greenberg and Diane Perkins, who looked like she'd ironed her slacks at 5 a.m. just for this moment. "Where do you think you're going?" Eleanor said, arms crossed like a school principal on a power trip.
I ser det her.
"My sister is in labor. Move your car." "She's not a registered guest," Eleanor replied matter-of-factly, like Rachel's contractions were an inconvenience to her HOA spreadsheet. "You've already received multiple violation notices. We cannot allow repeated breaches of protocol." "You want me to register my sister's uterus?" Rachel screamed again, louder this time. I turned to see blood on her pants, and my brain shifted into full panic mode. "Call an ambulance." I barked at Tom, who was already dialing with trembling hands. Martin pulled out his phone. "Documenting this," he muttered, snapping photos like a nosy tourist. "You people are out of your damn minds," I shouted. Eleanor looked unfazed. "Rules are rules. Emergency situations should be accounted for in advance." And that's when the neighborhood started waking up. Doors creaked open. Curtains were pulled back. And from across the street, Mrs. Wilson in her robe yelled, "Eleanor, have you lost your mind? That woman is having a baby. Stay out of this, Doris. This is HOA business." Eleanor snapped, her voice hitting a pitch only dogs could fully appreciate. It took 10 excruciating minutes for the ambulance to arrive. Paramedics had to wheel the gurney around Eleanor's SUV, because, naturally, she refused to move it. As Rachel was loaded in, I turned to Eleanor, my voice trembling with rage. "You could have cost my sister her life." Eleanor simply smiled. "Then maybe next time you'll read the bylaws more carefully, Mr. Harris."
I didn't respond.
I couldn't. My hands were shaking as I sped to the hospital behind the ambulance. 1 hour later, I sat in the waiting room, hands still clenched, when Dad walked in. His tie was crooked, his face tight. "How's Rachel?" he asked. "Alive," I said. "The baby too." "Barely." He exhaled, then quietly asked, "Eleanor did this?" I nodded. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he pulled out his phone and said calmly, "Text me her full name." "And Martin's." "What are you going to do?" I asked. He looked me in the eye, colder than I'd ever seen him. "Nothing illegal," he said. "But no one puts my granddaughter at risk and walks away clean." My father always said the law isn't about emotion, it's about structure, precedent, and pressure applied in just the right place. But as he sat in my living room the morning after Rachel gave birth prematurely, flipping through a folder of HOA documents like it was a crime scene, I could tell he was making this personal. "Michael," he said, tapping a line with a pen. "You see this? This phrase here. Visitors must be registered. That's vague. It doesn't distinguish between overnight guests, vendors, or your own damn mother bringing lasagna." "I figured they just made the rules up as they go," I muttered, sipping reheated coffee. "They might have," he said, "which means it's time to find out what else they've fabricated." And just like that, Judge Richard Harris wasn't just my dad anymore. He was in full-on courtroom mode. The man who once grilled a corrupt mayor on the witness stand was now building a case against Eleanor Thompson and her HOA goon squad. That afternoon, he paid a little visit to the county recorder's office. I tagged along, mostly to keep him from yelling at anyone. But he didn't need to. He spoke politely to the clerk, requested the incorporation documents for the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, and smiled when they handed over the file. Then his smile vanished. "Michael," he said slowly, flipping through the pages. "Do you see a signature here?" No." "That's because there isn't one. No official record of certification. No county stamp. Which means this HOA legally is standing on a foundation of sand." I blinked.
Wait.
"Are you saying the HOA itself might not even be legit?" "Not fully, no. Not under county law." The next day, he started digging deeper, submitting public records requests, combing through court filings, and using his other skill set, calling in favors from people who owed him. By the end of the week, we had what could only be described as a small but growing conspiracy board. String, pins, notes. Rachel said our dining room looked like a Netflix crime doc in the making. But the real jackpot came when he found the HOA's financial disclosures. filed annually, barely legible, and clearly doctored. Turns out Martin Greenberg, the HOA's vice president and Eleanor's right-hand man, owned a landscaping company. Guess which company had received a no-bid contract from the HOA for the last 3 years?
Yep.
Greenberg Outdoor Solutions. Paid triple the local market rate. And the kicker? The checks were signed by Eleanor. This isn't just overreach, Dad said, eyes narrowing. This is fraud. Meanwhile, I decided to review the so-called covenant I'd apparently signed when buying the house. You know, the stack of legalese you skim when you're mostly focused on not draining your savings account. Buried in Section 7.2 was a single sentence about visitor guidelines. And guess what? Nothing in there about needing to register family members for short-term visits. No time limits. No fine print. Just a vague note about extended stays using community amenities, like the gym or the clubhouse, neither of which my 4-year-old niece had any interest in. So, why had I been fined, harassed, blocked in during a medical emergency? Because Eleanor wasn't following the rules. She was rewriting them. And now, thanks to Dad's detective work, we had proof that her little kingdom wasn't just overreaching, it was illegally built from the start. He looked at me across the table, surrounded by stacks of evidence, and said quietly, "Michael, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about how many people she's bullied into silence." For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. Because now, we weren't just fighting back. We were coming for the whole damn empire. I wasn't expecting a manila envelope to change everything. It showed up on my porch one morning. No return address, no handwriting, just taped neatly to my front door like a quiet dare. Inside was a USB drive, wrapped in a sticky note that simply read, "You didn't get this from me,
Ed."
It didn't take a genius to figure out who Elle was. Linda Blake, the soft-spoken HOA board member who always looked like she was trying not to be noticed. The one who'd stared at me with something resembling pity when Eleanor handed out violation slips like Halloween candy. I closed the blinds, locked the door, and plugged the drive into my laptop like I was defusing a bomb. At first, it seemed innocuous, just some budget spreadsheets and meeting minutes. But then I opened the folder titled HOA_confidential, and that's when my stomach dropped. There were scanned invoices showing Eleanor authorizing payments to companies that didn't exist. Landscaping, plumbing, even a security consultant named Sunridge Strategies LLC, a company registered to a P.O. box in Florida and, conveniently, owned by Eleanor's sister. It got worse. Much worse. There was a subfolder called Profiles. Inside were PDF files, one for each resident. Names, addresses, occupations, marital status, income estimates, social media screenshots. One document labeled Harris, Michael, contained a screen grab from my Instagram, me holding a beer on the 4th of July. Next to it, drinks, loud parties. Tech job equals high income. Could be problematic long-term. Another note, father equals federal judge. Watch carefully. My blood ran cold. These weren't just HOA records. These were dossiers, like something out of an FBI file, except created by a woman whose greatest power should have been telling people their lawn gnomes were tacky. Then came the emails.
Hundreds of them.
In one, Eleanor told the board to monitor houses with frequent visitors and to build paper trails early for leverage. In another, she wrote, use the violation system to squeeze out the troublemakers. Most people don't want the hassle. But the worst one, the one that made me physically recoil, was dated a week after Rachel gave birth.
Subject:
Incident with Harris, leverage opportunity. She actually tried to spin Rachel's medical emergency as a justification for tightening visitor rules, citing chaotic behavior and ambulance disruption. I slammed the laptop shut and sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't even about power. This was about control through fear. A knock at the door startled me. I peeked through the peephole. It was Linda. She stood nervously, arms crossed, glancing behind her like she was being followed. I opened the door just enough to let her slip inside. I couldn't keep watching, she whispered, eyes brimming with guilt. What she's doing, it's not just unethical, it's dangerous. And illegal. You kept copies of this? I asked. I've been on the board for 3 years. You think this is the first time she's pulled this? She hesitated. She has dirt on everyone. I think that's how she keeps them loyal. What kind of dirt? I asked. Linda looked at me like she was debating whether to say it. Then finally, medical records, divorce proceedings, even one neighbor's adoption paperwork. I don't know how she got it, but she keeps it all, calls it insurance.
I felt something shift inside me then.
This wasn't a suburban squabble anymore. It was a war. And thanks to Linda, we finally had our first real weapon. The night of the HOA community meeting, the folding chairs filled up faster than an open bar at a wedding. People trickled in carrying coffee cups, camp chairs, and my personal favorite, a woman with a bag of popcorn like she knew this was going to be a show. And she was absolutely right. I stood in the back of the Willow Creek Community Center, the USB drive from Linda in my pocket, my dad seated beside me in full judge mode silence. A projector hummed, flickering against the white wall. Eleanor stood at the front, flanked by Martin and Diane like some evil suburban trinity. Her face wore that tight, step-forward smile she reserved for the moments right before she crushed someone's soul. I'm sure you've all heard the rumors, she began, her voice syrupy sweet, with just a hint of threat. There have been accusations against your HOA board. Sadly, misinformation spreads like wildfire when stirred by people who don't understand our community values. Her eyes landed directly on me. And unfortunately, those accusations stem from one source. A resident who, alongside his father, has made it his mission to disrupt our peaceful neighborhood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people turned to stare. A few even clutched their pearls, yes, literally. I stepped forward. You're right, Eleanor, I said, loud and clear. There's been misinformation. Let's clear it up. I pulled the USB from my pocket and plugged it into the projector laptop. The first slide appeared. Greenberg Landscaping, HOA payments, $387,000 over 2 years. The crowd stirred. Someone actually hissed. Slide 2. Sunridge Strategies, LLC. Eleanor's sister's company. Security consulting, $58,000. Slide 3. Resident dossiers, names, income, personal notes. And then the video. It was grainy, but unmistakable. The ambulance blocked by Eleanor's SUV. My sister screaming in labor. My voice begging. Eleanor saying, emergency situations should be accounted for in advance. Silence dropped over the room like a guillotine. You want to talk about values? I asked. These are the values of your HOA president. For once, Eleanor didn't have a quip. Her face twitched, jaw clenched like she was chewing nails. This is a witch hunt, she finally snapped. A calculated smear campaign from a judge and his troublemaker son, who don't belong here. That's when it happened. An elderly man in the second row, Mr. Callahan, who'd lived here since the 90s, stood up with both hands on his cane. His voice was gravelly, but full of fire. You've bullied us long enough, Eleanor. Fined us. Shamed us. Threatened us. I've lived through 3 presidents, 2 wars, and 1 hip replacement, but I've never been afraid of my own neighborhood until you came along. Applause broke out.
Loud. Genuine.
One woman shouted. She threatened to fine me for letting my grandkids use chalk on the sidewalk. Another yelled. She told my husband our wind chimes were culturally disruptive. Eleanor tried to regain control, gaveling the table like she was Judge Judy on a sugar crash. Order. This is not on the agenda. But it was too late. Someone had live-streamed the entire meeting to Facebook. My inbox buzzed with a message from a local reporter. This HOA story is blowing up.
Can we interview you?
I looked back at Eleanor. Her carefully constructed empire, built on rules, fear, and HOA jargon, was starting to crumble right in front of her. And all it took was one truth teller, one USB drive, and a grandfather with a cane and a grudge. The courthouse smelled like old paper and nervous sweat. It was standing room only in Department 12, and every single seat was filled with a mix of angry homeowners, curious reporters, and people who just loved a good public scandal. I spotted Mrs. Wilson in the third row with knitting needles in her lap, like this was a matinee performance. She wasn't wrong. At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff called the room to order. The judge, Honorable Maria Chavez, sharp-eyed and 0% nonsense, stepped onto the bench. She wasn't someone my dad knew. We checked. No favors. No friendships. No connections. Just a judge with a reputation for burning through lies like acid on paper. Let's begin, she said crisply. Case 1486, Willow Creek HOA versus Harris. Eleanor stood.
Calm. Composed.
Wearing a pale blue suit that screamed, I'm innocent, but also rich. Her lawyer, some smarmy guy with a pocket square and a perfect tan, did most of the talking. Your Honor, he began smoothly, my client merely upheld the policies voted on by this community. This is not a case of fraud or abuse. It's a case of two individuals, he pointed to me and my father, refusing to follow basic community standards. Judge Chavez raised one eyebrow. Is that so? Then she turned to the projector, because yes, the evidence was again being presented on screen like a TED Talk from hell. She clicked through. Greenberg Landscaping receiving contracts far above market value. Payments to Sunridge Strategies, aka Eleanor's sister. Resident dossiers. And of course, the ambulance footage. The judge didn't flinch. She just leaned back, steepled her fingers, and said, And you're suggesting this is all standard procedure? Eleanor's lawyer coughed. The board had discretion. That's not discretion, she cut in. That's embezzlement, surveillance abuse, and potential HIPAA violations depending on how these resident profiles were sourced.
Boom.
The room buzzed. Reporters started scribbling like mad. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably. Her hands twisted the fabric of her skirt. And then something in her cracked. She stood. Without cue. Without whispering to her lawyer. Just rose like someone about to throw herself off a cliff. Your Honor, she said, voice trembling, I'd like to change my plea. Everyone froze. I'll cooperate. Fully. If I'm granted immunity, I will provide documentation of a much larger network of misconduct, 17 HOAs across the state, working in coordination with local contractors, county inspectors, and developers.
Gasps.
Audible.
Real.
Even the judge blinked. You're saying this goes beyond Willow Creek? Yes, Eleanor replied. This is how new communities are financed. We inflate fees, approve inflated bids, and the contractors kick back percentages to consultants, some of whom sit on county boards. You could hear a pin drop. And then my dad leaned over to me and whispered, She just opened the floodgates. Judge Chavez nodded slowly. We'll recess for 30 minutes while I consult with the district attorney. Bailiff, ensure Mrs. Thompson is escorted securely to chambers. As Eleanor was led away, not in cuffs, but surrounded by marshals, you could see it. The defeat. The relief. The unraveling. Eleanor Thompson wasn't a tyrant anymore. She was a witness. A snitch. A canary finally singing. And she just pointed to something much darker than any of us had imagined. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was a statewide conspiracy. Fallout doesn't always arrive with fire and fanfare. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, like the guilt after a lie or the silence after a bomb has already gone off. After the courtroom explosion that was Eleanor's confession, Willow Creek Estates was no longer in denial. It was in shock. The news broke fast. That very evening, local news anchors looked like they'd hit the scandal jackpot. The headlines practically screamed, HOA president turns witness in massive fraud scheme, 17 communities under scrutiny. By morning, Eleanor Thompson had been officially indicted. Charges: conspiracy, financial fraud, and abuse of power under civil codes so obscure my dad had to dust off law books from the 80s to explain them. Martin Greenberg, however, wasn't quite so eloquent. He was caught at a rest stop outside the city, trying to flee with $12,000 in cash, a fake ID that read, Marty Granger, and, no joke, his HOA polo shirt still on. Arrested on the spot. The mugshot? Spectacular. He looked like someone who just realized HOA power doesn't come with federal immunity. Meanwhile, the rest of the board collapsed like wet cardboard. Diane Perkins lawyered up, claiming mental duress. 2 others fled the state. One board member, Linda told me this in confidence, tried to cut a plea deal before the indictment even dropped. It was chaos. Delicious, justified chaos. Until the messages started. The first was vague. You've made enemies, Harris. Better know who to trust. The second, a little sharper. Judges retire. Houses don't move. Back off, or your house burns. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My heart dropped, then flipped to anger. Whoever sent it thought using another language would cover their tracks. They didn't count on me forwarding it to my old college roommate, a first-gen Vietnamese American now working cybercrime with the FBI. The message was flagged.
Traced. Logged.
By morning, a marked patrol car was stationed at the end of my block, and Officer Jenkins, the local beat cop with the ironic mustache, started doing slow drive-bys at night. Dad was already 10 steps ahead, contacting the county fraud unit to expand protection protocols and open a broader criminal probe. He wasn't just angry anymore, he was in crusade mode. And as if karma was trying to keep pace, that same week, a county order came down. All contracts awarded to Greenberg Outdoor Solutions were to be immediately frozen, audited, and revoked where possible. Martin's empire, his trucks, tools, trailers, even his website, went dark overnight. The HOA bank accounts were placed under county escrow. A bright red sign was taped to the HOA office door. Under investigation, entry forbidden without legal authorization. That part?
Satisfying.
But I couldn't relax. Not yet. Not with my sister still recovering, not with strangers texting arson threats, and definitely not while Eleanor, despite her deal, was still out on bond and living 5 blocks away with her curtains permanently drawn. We'd cut off the snake's head. But something told me the body was still twitching. It's strange how quiet feels different when the chaos is gone. A month after Eleanor's downfall, Willow Creek Estates didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a neighborhood. Lawnmowers hummed without passive-aggressive glares. Kids biked down sidewalks without being questioned like they were crossing a border checkpoint. The mailman even waved again. And most shocking of all, the HOA office was empty. After the county's investigation, the old HOA board was formally dissolved. Every contract signed under Eleanor's administration was voided, and the HOA funds, what was left of them, were placed under county oversight. The residents, now wide awake and royally pissed, called for a community-wide election. I got 3 separate nominations to run for HOA president. One woman even left me a bundt cake with Michael for Prez written in red icing. I appreciated the sentiment. Ate the cake. But I politely declined. I've already fought one neighborhood war, I told the nomination committee, and I'm not looking to get redeployed. Instead, I nominated someone better. Rose Washington, retired school principal, former HOA secretary before Eleanor pushed her out for allowing Halloween decorations in September. Rose didn't take crap from anyone, but she also baked amazing snickerdoodles. That's what I call balanced leadership. Under Rose's guidance, the new board drafted a revised covenant, the first one actually written in plain English. Section 1. Page 1. First line. All family members are welcome. Always. No exceptions. No registration forms. Just bring a casserole and don't block the driveway. It was read aloud at the first official meeting. The room burst into applause. But there was more. The county had recovered over $270,000 in misused HOA funds from frozen accounts and seized assets, including Martin's now foreclosed lake cabin and a consulting retreat center that was really just a hot tub and a tent. So, what did the neighborhood vote to do with the money? Reboot the community pool project, of course, the one Eleanor had canceled 3 years ago, citing budgetary constraints while secretly funneling funds into her sister's fake security firm. Now, construction crews were back.
Real ones.
With permits and hard hats and everything. On the edge of the lot where the new pool would go, A freshly painted sign read, "Coming soon, the Willow Creek Family Pool, funded by justice and a little spite." We all signed it like it was a victory banner. On Saturday mornings, people brought donuts and coffee to watch the bulldozers dig. The kids ran around pretending they were lifeguards in training. Someone even brought a Bluetooth speaker and played Eye of the Tiger. It wasn't perfect. HOA politics never are. But it felt like ours again. The fences were still white. The lawns still trimmed. But now, no one cared if your guests parked on the street for an hour. Or if your niece screamed a little too loud in the sprinkler. As I sat on my porch one evening, sipping lemonade, my dad joined me with a satisfied look. "You know," he said, "this neighborhood might finally be worth the property taxes." I laughed. "You think?" He nodded toward the pool construction across the street. Sometimes justice isn't just a courtroom ruling. Sometimes it's a diving board, paid for with clawed-back embezzlement money. I raised my glass to that. We hadn't just survived. We had rebuilt. And this time, we were doing it right. 3 months after the trial, Eleanor Thompson stood before a packed courtroom, her pearl earrings catching the light one last time before the judge read the sentence. 7 years in state prison for conspiracy, fraud, and abuse of power under Civil Code 348.2. The gavel came down like a hammer on the past. 5 HOA board members were convicted. 2 took plea deals. Martin Greenberg cried during sentencing and claimed he just loved lawns. Diane Perkins swore she thought all the checks were for mulch.
The judge didn't buy it.
The news made every local station. HOA horror, justice served in suburban scandal, one cheer in red, flashing under Eleanor's mugshot. My favorite headline, though, came from the County Chronicle. Fraud, fines, and flaming hot HOAT. Meanwhile, Willow Creek was reborn. The community pool, long delayed and quietly buried by fake budget issues, had finally been finished. Thanks to the recovered funds and a team of residents who actually knew how to use Excel, it was beautiful. Tile mosaics, splash zone for the kids, even shaded lounge chairs for the grandpas. And to celebrate, I hosted the first ever family first pool party. No registration. No clipboard. No HOA officials standing at the gate counting heads like we were fugitives. Just burgers, music, laughing kids, and way too much sunscreen. Everyone came. Mrs. Wilson brought her famous potato salad. The Washingtons grilled ribs. Someone set up karaoke. A 6-year-old DJ played Baby Shark 6 times in a row. Nobody complained. As the sun dipped below the rooftops and the pool glowed under string lights, my dad, Judge Richard Harris, sat beside me, paper plate balanced on his knee, sipping sweet tea. He looked out over the pool, then at the rows of neighbors chatting and laughing, and said with a smile, "You know, sometimes it takes one ruined barbecue to expose an entire broken system." I laughed. "You think we're safe now?" He gave a thoughtful pause. "Safe enough for now." Later that night, after the last kid had been toweled off and the last speaker unplugged, I walked home feeling lighter than I had in months. But as I was about to shut down my laptop, a new email notification popped up.
No sender.
No subject.
Just a single line in the body. Chuyện này chưa kết thúc đâu.
Vietnamese again. Translated. This isn't over yet. My smile faded, because justice may have cleaned up Willow Creek. But someone out there still wasn't done playing games. And I had a feeling, deep in my gut, that barbecue season was about to heat up all over again.